If you let people talk enough, they'll tell you who they are. They'll reveal it. They'll show it to you. And when they do, I don't manipulate it into meaning something that it doesn't mean. I take it for what it is and I filter it through the standard that I have. And if it does not meet the standard, I don't need a second, third, fourth, and fifth time to convince me of what I already know. We know deep down inside most of the time, but sometimes we can let other things come into play and convince us to stay in things that we really knew at the outset weren't for us.
Welcome to The Next Page with Jessica Tucker.
So much of what we experience in relationships and interactions with other people is a result and a reflection, not necessarily of how they feel about us, but about how they feel about themselves. There's so much projection and transference that happens when we interact with other people. And if we're not careful, we will experience something with someone and then tell ourselves a story about it that's not all the way accurate. And we will accept things, labels that don't belong to us and don't apply to us. And what really solidifies this for me, what really showed this to me was very early memories of issues with this adult person in my life when I was a very little girl. This person was critical and mean-spirited, and it seemed like there was nothing I could do right in this person's eyes. In fact, the better I did, the more angry they got. And it could be any category. It could be in sports, in music, in academics. It could be just that people liked me or thought I was funny. This adult figure just did not like when I was good at anything or accepted by anybody. And they made it their mission to put an attack, an all-out assault on my confidence. I remember when I was in undergrad studying psychology, there was a concept I learned about called self-actualization. And an oversimplified definition of that is just a deep acceptance of yourself and others. It's a sense of security within your own self. And by what I believe to be the grace of God, I self-actualized very early in life. And I believe that it's a gift from God because He knew what I was going to face and He knew I would need it. Not only did this adult figure not like when I was good at things, but they also seemed to be so bothered by the fact that I self-actualized early in life, because that created a barrier that they couldn't penetrate. They weren't able to just tell me any story about myself and manipulate me into having low self-esteem. As much as they tried, I knew this can't be my doing. I'm a child. I didn't know everything at the time. I don't know everything now. But what I knew when I was a little kid was this can't be my fault because I'm a child. There's nothing I could have done to this adult person. This has to be an issue within that person. And even that concept right there, my ability to see that person for who they really were, to see through that person, they resented that as well. Because often when people are dealing with deep insecurities, they will create mirages. They'll create whole made up identities that they cocoon themselves in. And they want everyone to believe the story that they're telling that they know is not true. And if you can see through that, they resent you. You become enemy to them. You become threat to them because you might expose them for who they really are. And they're not ready to face themselves about that. And they're certainly not ready to face that when it comes to other people who they feel that they have fooled. When you feel security within yourself and you also are able to see through the facade that another person puts up, you become a threat to them simply by your awareness that the other person is not being their authentic self. What I've learned is that in some situations, if you can't trace what you may have done to a person, or they don't even know you very well, or they're not close to you, or you just can't trace it back to any action that you've done wrong to someone, you've tried to talk with them about it. Sometimes when you can't trace it, it's because it really doesn't have anything to do with you. It's in the other person. And I want to talk about a few things that I've learned along the way when I've had this kind of encounter with other people where I couldn't trace what I could have possibly done that they just do not like me or they can't seem to treat me well. What could be the root of this if I've not done anything to them. What could it be if I have gone through and checked and maybe even talked with the person and prayed about it and asked God to show me my own heart, show me my own actions, and nothing seems to be rising to the surface? What could be the explanation for having these negative experiences with people? The first one I'll start with is that you take away their excuses. I remember I heard a prior mentor say something, and it was so interesting. It always stuck with me. He said that those who accept excuses do so because they want to make them. They're very comfortable with accepting all the excuses why someone else didn't do something because they want to be able to have that in their back pocket when they need to make an excuse. It follows that if you're a person who does not make many excuses, you can be a threat to someone who does. I remember I had this situation at a previous job, and this person who actually was part of the board who hired me, we ended up working in the same organization, and this person was in leadership over me. They kept hearing these stories about how I was having issues with all of these different people. And it's very logical to think that if one person is having issues with a lot of people, they're the common denominator. They must be at fault. That's kind of a logical way to think about it. But what I've learned is that the common denominator is not always at fault. They could be the catalyst. It could be that they are the minority in a situation. They're the only one who will go this other way. And that makes the majority very uncomfortable because they want to be able to have their excuses. They want to be able to go this way. They want to be able to say that it can only be done this way. We can't do it another way. And then you show up and you just do it another way and you take away their excuses. That could be a situation where, yes, you're the common denominator, but it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you're doing something right. So this person who was on the board that hired me, who was now a leader in the organization that I was in, a leader over me, came to me one day and started talking with me about the issues that so many people in that organization seemed to have with me. And the person said to me, "Don't you think you just need to adjust? All these people have this issue with you. It's got to be you." And I told the person a little story. And I said, let's imagine that all of us who work here are out in a hot field and it's sweltering. And everyone's just lying down on the ground, sweating and feeling faint. And there's water over there somewhere, but they just don't feel like getting up to get it. And everyone is able to get up to get it because that's an important distinction. Everyone's able. Everyone has the full use of their limbs to be able to get up and just go get the water and get out of the sweltering sun. So imagine that we're all lying there, all of us, me included, and I'm thirsty and hot too. And I say, well, why don't we just get up? And then I get up and start walking towards the water. If everyone there really wants to be able to make the excuse that it can't be done, who are they going to be mad at in that scenario? The person who just got up and exposed the fact that they were making excuses. And when I told this person this, and it was so weird because it was just a story that just came to me, but I'll never forget it. The person just kind of stared at me, and you could kind of see the micro expressions of frustration and anger, that kind of clenching of the jaw and tightening of the lips there. And they really didn't say much in response. They just kind of looked, because I think they knew deep down that happens. That people get into groupthink and they decide, let's all just agree together that this thing can't be done, that we'll all make a collective excuse so that none of us have to do anything, that so that we can all procrastinate, so that we can all put this off and then talk about shoulda, woulda, coulda, if we could have, if these barriers weren't in the way. Everyone can collectively make these excuses and just sit comfortably in that. And basically, the real life scenario that was going on was that there were certain things that people in the organization widely would not do because they knew that it would affect their ability to get a promotion. That the social consequence of doing the right thing in a lot of these scenarios was that you wouldn't get promoted because leadership above you would see you as someone who was not controllable enough. They would see you as someone who they would not be able to puppet around and do with what they will. You would end up appearing like someone who was too strong-willed. So if you didn't do these things that really were wrong, then you wouldn't get a promotion. And so what people wanted to say was, well, we have to do it this way. Otherwise, we won't get what we need in our livelihood. And I just simply refused because promotion comes from the Lord, and the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he'll turn it whatever way that he will. I refused to make that excuse. And so I became public enemy number one. And this person who was part of the board who hired me, I think came to regret that a little bit because this person was also going along with what the group said, that we have to do it this way so that we can get promotions. Really, that's a fear response. And the reality is the courageous way is often the way that requires you to be selfless and to trust God to make things happen a certain way and not people. Another reason why you could be experiencing unexplained conflict with other people is because you reveal their lack of standard in an area. The height of your standard reveals the lack of theirs, or that they have a low standard in a certain area. An example that comes to mind is, I think it was towards the end of last year. I remember I posted this reel, and I was talking about there was this guy that I was hanging out with, and it got a little late, and we had talked for a long time, for hours. It was a great conversation, and I talked about all the attributes that he had that a lot of people would find desirable, that he had a good job, that he took care of his family, and that he was funny, and that he was very good looking, all these different things. And it got a little late, and I got up to leave, and he got a little upset about that and said that nobody wants to sit up here talking to you all night for nothing. And that was the end of our friendship, because it shouldn't be considered nothing to talk with me. And to my not so surprise, but a little, there were a lot of people in the comments who were criticizing me for seeing that the way that I did. People were saying that I was too hard on him, and what did I expect because it was late. And what was interesting was, at the time, when you post a reel, it's 90 seconds long. You can't give full context of what's going on. So I knew that I had been friends with this person for a number of years, that he claimed to be good with the boundaries that I had and the standard that I had, that we spent time together and we had good conversations. And I guess he just had an ulterior motive and his patience ran out or something. None of that really is the issue. What's interesting is I looked at these comments and I didn't respond. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you get you somebody that doesn't like you. You get you somebody who doesn't want to talk with you. Because if I can't talk to someone for a little while, and by late, when I said I left late, by late I meant 8 o'clock in the summer. The sun was still out. Which is just another detail that you can't really give in those quick scenarios. But regardless, it's interesting how many people got so defensive about the boundary that I set, the standard that I have when it comes to that. I remember there's a friend of mine who passed away, and I knew him since the 9th grade. And I'll never forget, he was a poet. He could write, and he was just such a wonderful person. And I remember he told me that he loved the sound of my voice. And when I say that will forever be a standard. So no, I'm not going to take what this person said. Nobody wants to sit up here and talk to you all night for nothing. I'm not going to take what that person said and brush it off as a joke or tell myself some other story about it. He said what he said, and that doesn't work for me. And that visceral reaction that some people had, that they were just so upset at me and so critical of me for taking that statement and drawing a boundary and saying this doesn't work for me. That reaction came from somewhere, and it was within the people who had that to say. It wasn't with me. Sometimes when we have a standard and another person has a different standard and they're not secure in the standard that they have, they would rather criticize you into lowering yours than to address the fact that their discomfort comes from the fact that their standard isn't as high as they would like it to be. Because the reality is, we all want to be seen and heard and valued, especially by our partner, especially by our significant other. And what's interesting is, going back to the self-actualization concept, because I self-actualized so early in life, and I really do feel very comfortable in my own skin, and I really do trust that what God has for me is for me, and I truly do trust that I won't miss anything because I'm so grafted in, I'm so intimately close with the God of all creation. He won't let me miss it as long as I'm in covenant and relationship and intimacy and communication with him. I don't have to be afraid about having a standard. I can honestly say that sticking by the standard that I have has never served me wrong. I've never regretted it. I've never felt like I missed out on this person, or I missed out on this opportunity, or this thing didn't happen because I was too hard on. I've never felt like that. I am the daughter of the Most High King. Why would I entertain someone further who said nobody wants to sit up talking to me all night for nothing? And instead of hearing something like that from someone and making excuses for them, or telling myself another story, or saying they didn't really mean it that way, I let people tell me who they are. If you let people talk enough, they'll tell you who they are. They'll reveal it. They'll show it to you. And when they do, I don't manipulate it into meaning something that it doesn't mean. I take it for what it is, and I filter it through the standard that I have. And if it does not meet the standard, I don't need a second, third, fourth, and fifth time to convince me of what I already know. We know deep down inside most of the time, but sometimes we can let other things come into play and convince us to stay in things that we really knew at the outset weren't for us, didn't suit us. So many relationships that people end up in, they go past those initial red flags, and then they end up in something that's worse than it seemed like it was initially. The standard that you have is there for your protection of you physically, emotionally, protection of your joy and peace. Hold the standard. Don't let other people convince you to lower it or get rid of it because of where their standards are. Don't let them project that onto you. Because going back to the example, not one time have I been like, oh man, I really missed out on that guy who didn't like to talk to me. It's never happened. I've never thought to myself, wow, I really missed out on this transactional relationship with this man who felt like if he talked with me for a little while, that I then owed him something in return. Never one time have I felt like that. So keep the standard. Another potential reason why you may have conflict with another person that's unexplained is that you break through a ceiling in a certain area. So many times when I start to research something that is difficult, or a new endeavor, or something that isn't done by a lot of people who I know, or I haven't heard a lot about it, I have so often heard people say, well, that can't be done, or that's for this group of people, but we can't access it. People like us can't access it. I've also had people who are in those in-groups tell me that I don't belong there, that I can't have access to certain things, that I can't achieve certain things because I'm not part of their group, because I'm not part of that demographic, because I didn't grow up where they grew up, or because of the color of my skin, or because I'm a woman, or because of my age. So many different things come into play. And often people will use that limiting language, and they will either use it as an excuse as to why they can't do a thing, or they'll use it weaponized to try to keep people out and convince other people that they can't be part of it. I remember I had this supervisor at a job I used to have. And this person was in higher leadership. And there was an issue that came up with the position that I was in. And I wanted to stay in that position, but I needed some adjustments to be made. And that supervisor is a very fearful person who doesn't like to rock the boat. That person tends to cower to leadership who were above them. And that person tried to convince me not to speak up about what I needed in the position that I was in. And I said, no, you've done this for these other people over here who requested the same thing. So what's the difference? Now, of course, that supervisor couldn't answer that question because, to be honest about the answer to that question, would be to reveal some of that person's biases and the organization's biases. But I just innocently asked the question. I said, well, what's the difference between me and these people over here who you've granted this for without any issue? And I didn't get an answer. The supervisor just kept trying to convince me not to submit my request. And then something interesting happened. That same supervisor came back and said, well, we can grant this request for you, but you have to take this demotion in order for you to get it. Now, these other people who they granted it for easily, they didn't have to take a demotion. And they're all of these people are in these higher positions, higher than mine. And they want me to believe that I can't have the same or similar access that they have. They wanted me to believe that. And so I said, no, I won't be taking any demotion. I'm submitting my request and it will work in my favor. What's interesting is that I submitted my request and it did not initially work in my favor. It got denied, and that supervisor seemed so smug about it. The supervisor came and told me, well, they denied it. I'm so sorry. You should really consider taking the demotion. And I said, no, I know what God said to me. This is mine. Just a few weeks after that denial, a new leader over my supervisor came in, and the Holy Spirit showed me that's the person you need to talk with. So I went to that person while they were still new to the organization, before they could form all these different opinions and biases about people. I went to that person and I just asked them, I said, is this available to me? This adjustment, is it available to me? And they said, sure, we have plenty of people doing that. I said, really? That's interesting, because I was told that I had to take this demotion in order to get it. And they said, who told you that? I said, funny that you ask. Long story short, it was all sorted out in my favor. I broke through the ceiling. This thing that my supervisor and other leaders who were part of a group that I wasn't in, they wanted to tell me that I couldn't do it. But there's an authority that you walk in when you understand that it is not other people who have the true power and control in your life. It's God. And the enemy, much like how God uses people to get his will done in the earth, the enemy also uses people. And if the enemy can get you in your mind, if he can get you to believe things about yourself that aren't true, then he can get you to believe things about God that aren't true. And if he can get you to believe the lie, he can immobilize you. He can get you into a cycle where you're despairing and you're experiencing self-pity and you won't move in one direction or the other. He'll get you so stuck in that cycle that you won't go anywhere. And this is not some attempt to get everyone to be paranoid about everything anyone says to them, to think that everything anyone says to them is some sort of warfare. But I do think that we often underestimate how much of what we experience is warfare. In my dealings with people, I'm not fearful or paranoid, but I do listen carefully to what is said to me. And I will often respond to what is said to me with a question. Because if you respond to what people say with a question, now then they have to face what they have said. And the follow-up questions that I have tend to either confirm or correct what I believe is being done to me in that situation. And that's what's important at the end of the day. When you're faced with these things and you're wondering, how do I discern if I'm dealing with any of these scenarios that we've talked about today? questions will help you to confirm that. Using the examples that I talked about today, the very first one where I talked about when I was really little and I was dealing with this adult person, I didn't ask the person the question at the time because I was a child. But the question I asked myself is, what could I have done to this person to deserve this treatment when I'm a little kid? That question helped me realize the issue wasn't in me. When I was talking with the person who was on the board who hired me at that previous job and was accusing me of being the issue because I was the common denominator, I had to ask the question, am I at fault because I'm the common denominator? Or am I the one person who is going against the grain, who's not going along with the groupthink, who's not making the excuses that are being made? There's a distinction there that's important. And we get to that distinction by asking the right questions. When my supervisor told me that I just could not have access to this thing, I asked, what is the difference between me and the other people who have gotten this approved so easily? What's the difference? See, because now that supervisor had to face, even though the person didn't answer audibly, they had to face internally that bias that they have. And when it ended up working out later in my favor, that person was so embarrassed, I assume, that they ended up actually transferring to another job that for them, position-wise, not pay, but position-wise, was a demotion. The very thing that supervisor told me that I had to do, that person ended up having to do because their bias got exposed by me asking the right questions. And being able to have the skill to be quick-witted, to have the right questions at the right time, that's something that I believe can be developed. And that comes with knowing who you are in God, knowing what His Word says about you so that the things that you speak are in alignment with what His Word says about you, and feeling comfortable and secure in your own self, because when you are, then people can't just tell you any story about you. It's just like when you know someone else really well, someone just can't come tell you any story about that person who you know really well and have you believe it. We should be the same way with ourselves, that someone can't just come and tell me, well, you just need to accept that guy that said that to you. You just need to accept it. It was just a joke. It's your own fault, because why would you expect to talk to someone for hours and not have them say something like that? And again, like I said, well, you get you somebody who doesn't like you. But I don't have to accept just anything because I know who I am and I know what I deserve. When we have conflict or strain with another person and we know that it is due to an action that we have done or something that has happened between us, 100% we ought to take accountability and work through that. But there are times that we have these issues with other people and we have no idea where they came from. I would say evaluate that, because it's possible that one or more of the scenarios that I've talked about today, that those are at the root of these unexplained conflicts that you have with people. And sometimes those issues are warfare. They're an attempt to warp your sense of self so that it negatively impacts your relationship with God. And that is what the enemy is after. Let's recognize the signs so that we are equipped to fight back, and so that we don't fall into the snares and traps that the enemy sets for us. God loves you. So do I. I'll see you in the next one.